Right everyone, today you join me on a pretty historical location in terms of UK parkour, and that is the Bewbush Parkour Park. Built in 2009, this makes it one of the first parkour parks built and developed in the UK. It's very different to a lot of the other parkour parks that I've visited. So today we're going to explore the parkour park. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history and why it's so different compared to other parkour parks. So from my research, this parkour park was built and opened in 2009. And from what I can find on the internet, there wasn't any other parkour parks built in that time. There was a couple that opened in kind of 2010, 2011, but in 2009, this was the only one that I could find. And it's quite a special place to me. Not only is it the place that I started coaching my parkour sessions, but it's also only just down the road from where I live. And the first thing you notice about the park is just how spread out everything is. It's a lot different compared to other UK parkour parks. If you look at some of my other videos on like the Grimsby Parkour Park, the Littlehampton Parkour Park, or the New Haven Parkour Park, you'll see that all the kind of bits at the park kind of connect together, whereas at Bewbush, everything is really separate. And there is one reason why the parkour park is built how it is, and that's because of the people that helped develop it. So the parkour park was built in kind of conjunction with Crawley Borough Council and a group called the Urban Playground Team. Now the Urban Playground Team are a group of individuals who kind of fuse different disciplines together. So they've got a bit of parkour, a bit of contemporary dance. They've kind of got all these different kind of disciplines, and they've implemented it in this kind of like one business or organization that does something called performance parkour. And due to all the individual structures that are kind of around the park, you'll definitely see this kind of contemporary dance inspiration come into the space. This bit right here, for example, is a like-for-like recreation of one of their performance parkour setups. And when this parkour park was built, it was pretty much the first in the country. It had no inspiration to draw from whatsoever. And back then, I think Freemove were trying to focus on building these parkour parks that all had these kind of individual elements. So if you look at New Haven, for example, it is pretty much a rail-focused parkour park, and that was kind of its thing. And this one here, you can definitely see that kind of dance influence that kind of comes into play. And I do think this parkour park was built by our friends at Freemove, and this would have been their first project to build. I can't see any logos around here, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that this was built by them back in 2009. And from looking at the parkour training area sign here, you can see that the area was funded and built by Crawley Borough Council and designed by the Urban Playground Team, with advice from Gravity Style, co-creators of parkour, and following consultation with the young people of Crawley. Now, I wouldn't say it was developed by one of the founders of parkour, but one of the people that influenced the design and the build of this parkour park was a guy called Malik Diouf, who was part of the Yamakasi, so that kind of first generation / second generation of parkour practitioners from France. So let's begin the walking tour. To start off at the park, you have these blocks that kind of go into the ground here, and they're kind of separate in kind of different ways. We've got different angles, different sizes between the two. And then we move over to the balance section here. So Buster, who is the guy that I guess fronts the Urban Playground Team, he wanted to create some conditioning and fundamental elements at the park, and this is one of them. So this is the balance one. So you've got there, which is your, like, I guess your precision trainers, and then here you've got a balance one that goes all the way down before moving to here, which is a bit more of a like calisthenics kind of area, good for kind of your pull-ups, your muscle-ups, building that strength that parkour practitioners should have to really develop their training. Over here we have some dip bars, which can also be used for different vaults and different variations, and moving over to the monkey bars over here as well. So the outside section of the parkour park is very much kind of embedding that original philosophy that came around parkour, which was to be strong, to be useful, and building your strength to really enhance and progress your training. Strong body, strong mind. And then we move over to the main builds of the park. And like I said, this is a like-for-like recreation and one of the setups that the Urban Playground Team uses in their performance parkour. And what I mentioned in my Grimsby video is what you see here. So this was before wielded setups kind of became a thing, and everything with the bars was bolted together. And sometimes They're not too bad right now, but sometimes these bars do get wobbly and they do have to be tightened by the council every so often. And that obviously comes with a lot of risk. If the equipment is loose and a kid jumps to it, for example, and it falls out, they could really hurt themselves. Now, I don't think this has ever fallen out. I don't think it's ever gotten to that point, but the council does have to come every so often to kind of do some touch-ups and some maintenance to the parkour park. And although it's quite an individual setup, like I said, it's so far away from everything else, it's actually quite a nice little setup. And what's really good about this parkour park is it does make you think about the section that you're training on. For example, it's very difficult to kind of build in anything from here or from the rails over to here, but this setup in itself is really good for kind of developing those smaller lines. There are still challenges here, you know, there's your precisions, there's your rail prees, there's your vaults, there's everything that you kind of need in this section here. And over the years, this park has seen some development. So this block here originally wasn't a block, it was actually some stairs, and you can kind of lightly see where it's been filled in across here. And that's something that this park has seen over the years. It's had some developments that have really kind of either enhanced the park or it's limited it in some ways. Around this side as well, they've kind of not gone for the flat concrete side like they have done over here. Instead, they've gone for this kind of like grooved kind of style setup. And I think this is to kind of develop the strength when it comes to climbing. You know, you can utilize different sections. It's a very climbing-esque wall, but also as well, it's really good for those beginners who are looking to practice their climb up movements and you maybe need a little bit more of a foothold. Moving on from that section, we're going to go to this section here, which is another one of those kind of individual setups. It's not as in-depth or as advanced as that one, but this is still another setup. And it's obviously got your slope, so you can do your palm spins. If you're a bit more of an advanced athlete, you could do inward flips, so like inward sides or wall flips or anything like that. But again, it's another simple setup that we've seen at this parkour park over the years. And here's another one of the things that's been added. This has been made higher, so it stopped, I think, down here originally, and now they've kind of filled it in with this concrete here. Got some more bars here, which are really good for some underbar challenges. And again, I think this is inspired by some of the Urban Playground team's setup. I've seen one of their parkour performances live, and I do remember vaguely seeing something like this in the setup. Here, they've gone away from the flat walls again, and they've gone for a more kind of faux brick structure. It doesn't really add anything to the wall. It is exactly the same as, I guess, using a brick wall outside, but I guess it's them trying to recreate some of the elements that you'll see in your outdoor training. Again, these bars are all put in with bolts. They're not welded. There's no welding bars at this park apart from the dips over there. Moving on to this section here, got a nice high pillar, which is good for your vaults over the top. And over the years as well, we've managed to kind of build some connections by jumping from here and down to the slope. We've also done the tic-tac into cat leap from there. So there are ways to kind of add the elements of this park together, but that is for the more experienced athlete. If you're just starting out with parkour, you're going to find it very challenging to connect this object over to that object. Again, real focus on performance parkour. You've got this kind of like weird bar set up here. It runs there and then it kind of like pyramids off. So you've got a little bit going down there and a little bit going there. You can connect this part to the pillars over there by using the benches. And then we move over to the vault focused section of the park. So you have two high blocks. I say high, you've got one lower block, one higher block, but this is kind of the element that you go to practice your vaults, to practice some of those more complex moves, you know, your kongs, your dive kongs, your double kongs, your speed vaults, your lazies. When I used to coach sessions here, this is where we would kind of take the individuals to learn some of those fundamental vaulting movements. And again, there is a lack of connection between everything. I'm going to stand on this just so you guys can get a bit of a wider look. It is all separated and segmented across the entire park. And there really isn't much options for connectivity. You can use the floor in the middle. You can do some like dive rolls, maybe some DD rolls, or if you're really explosive, you can do like a strong plyo from one point to the other, but it is all separate and it is on its own. Scaffolding setup is the final part of the main tour here. And over the years, this has seen some developments as well. I think as like health and safety standards have kind of come into play, this area has probably seen the most development. And I've got an old video that I shot here back in 2014 where I'll kind of put it on the screen and kind of overlay. But this section here, for example, had a crisscross, which they had to get rid of. Any kind of like slanted bar like that had to go. And I think that was due to some health and safety kind of coming into play and saying that you couldn't have diagonal rail structures in a park like this. But yeah, this one's kind of a weird one because it's not big enough for you to really focus on your laches unless you're doing this one across here. But this kind of bit in here, as you can probably see, it's all very clustered, kind of kept together. And again, that's where the element of performance parkour comes in mind. This is an area where you would almost create like a kind of flowy route or a dance routine to really try and utilize the sections and the areas that you've got. And of course, like every parkour park in the UK, it's got that spongy flooring. Now this parkour park, when it first opened and when I trained back in 2014 here, it didn't have the impact flooring. This is a relatively new addition, and I say that relatively because it's been years now since it's been here. But yeah, this impact flooring was not here before, and you can kind of see on the outline of the park here where it used to be concrete, and they've kind of added that impact flooring in. And of course, with that impact flooring comes its issues, and I'm going to show you this now. I actually reported this to the council about a year ago, and they've still not done anything about it. These big rips in the floor, which is the result of fires or kids just coming along and just picking at it. But this is quite prominent in most UK parkour parks, but here it's in some pretty dangerous areas. You know, this parkour park is right next to a school, so all it takes is for a kid to run, trip on that, and fly headfirst into the bars, which I don't want. I don't think the council wants either, but there just doesn't seem to be that much tender loving care to this parkour park. And that could just lead to some pretty horrific accidents and injuries because of the gaping hole in the floor. You could argue that the kids should be aware of what they're looking and what they're doing, but at the same time, they're kids. They're not always gonna have that kind of switch on in their head to look out for the risks. If you go to this parkour park looking for the biggest challenges that you want to do or the biggest movements you can, you are going to be disappointed. However, if you come here to focus on those littler movements, if you want to work on your connections, you want to work on your line building, then this parkour park is perfect for that. And for me, this parkour park has a very special place in my heart. It's also where I first started coaching parkour, and although the setup for a lot of individuals is pretty basic and pretty strange because it's all spread out, for those who are just looking to start parkour, it's a fantastic park to learn those fundamentals. You know that this is going to be your vault section. You know that this bit over here is going to be for your precisions. And as you progress your training, you're able to kind of open up these new opportunities and all these new challenges here. This parkour park gets used a lot by the kids, and I think that's fantastic. It's a brilliant space within the community for the kids to come down and just learn how to move safely. You know, I see kids all the time here who run up the slant and then they have to work out how to get down, and they like to thread through these bars here, and they love climbing on this section over here. So I don't think it is a bad parkour park at all, but it does have its limits. If you want to come down for a powerful session, you will be disappointed. Like I said, it's not something you're going to come down to and think of the biggest or the hardest challenges that you can do. You can have a nice, sweet little session here, line building or working on some techniques or just trying to like progress different stuff. It's quite like a nice space for that. And sadly, over the years, it just looks like it's been forgotten by the community. The community doesn't really come to train down here, which is quite a shame, because given its kind of history and it's being the first in the UK and it's got all these like cool little elements to it, it's a shame that the community doesn't really know about it and doesn't really come down to train. So where would I rank this park on my lists of UK parkour parks? It's definitely not the best. I'm gonna flat out say it is not the best parkour park. It is very unique and it's very strange and it's very weird. However, for me, it's got a special place in my heart, and I think just for the cultural and historical development of spaces within parkour in the UK, this can't be ignored. It is a lovely park. I enjoy coming down here. I try to come down at least a few times a year just to get some movement done, but I kind of like the dance element section of the park. It's something that I don't usually practice or that I usually train. So when I do come down here, I do have to think about the movements and the kind of stuff that I want to achieve. So this is it, the Bewbush Parkour Park. I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts about this parkour park down in the comments below. I'm really enjoying this video series where I go and visit different spaces within the parkour UK scene. And with this one being so historical, both within my own training, but for the development of parkour parks in the UK as well, I do thoroughly recommend taking a visit to this park if you can. If you did like the video, please leave it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. And if you do want to support the channel and my travels to different spaces across the UK parkour scene, you can join the channel for as little as 99p a month. And I look forward to exploring more places like this in the future. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll see you soon.